when do you think that kind of disconnect with Tyra started to happen? Like where was that, I guess, fallout?
Well, it was, I think there are many things that contributed. I recently spoke about, and people did not know that actually when it got to cycle 8, my contract was done, and I felt like I had done all that I could. And now there were so many cooks in the kitchen. Initially, I was just doing the creative and hiring the creative talent. Then there were some controversial shoots I wasn't comfortable with. So by the time I finished my contract, I said I was ready to move on. I was working on other shows. I was an e-correspondent. And she became very, she basically just said, I'm disappointed. And that was it, and kind of cut me off. And even outside of the show, we would almost talk every day, and it was very weird. But then about 2 weeks out of production to cycle 9, just kind of under pressure, they said, could he come back and just do one cycle of the show? And I was unavailable. And then it was kind of, it was presented to my lawyer at the time from the studio. Well, if I didn't come back, I would be putting them in a difficult position because they couldn't cast someone to replace me. And it was intimated that I wouldn't work for the studio again. So again, these kind of threats in this fear-based culture built. And I went back under pressure to work on the show. And she later admitted she behaved inappropriately, and she did apologize to me. So I want to preface it with that. But I walked onto set to shoot casting. It's just Miss J, her, and me. And she wouldn't talk to me unless the cameras were rolling. And you try and tape a whole cycle that way, and it was extremely difficult. And I think that changed things. And she did apologize, but then there were other things, a lot of things that contributed to kind of the shift. And there was a shift in culture behind the scenes, and it was not a great work environment. And I've worked in several different kind of entertainment shows and live event shows, and I'd never really experienced that. So it was difficult. It was really difficult. But I did go back, because some people say, well, why did you go back? Because then I went back, they asked me to come back for 4 more, and then you end up under contract, and you're just
totally,
and you can't speak about it because people are like, why are you talking about it now?
Right, and people give you shit for it for leaving. It's like, don't bite the hand that feeds you. You become the bad guy if you leave. Yes. So and it's crazy now, because at the time we didn't know, but now we kind of have heard these rumors and these stories that have come out from years ago of kind of the toxic environment on set and things that were going on. So now it all kind of makes sense.
Yeah. And I actually left the show after cycle 18, they wanted me to sign on for cycle 17, 18, 19, 20. And I said, no. We went back and forth. My contract was done last minute. I went back and did 2 cycles. I knew those were my 2 cycles. But of course, I had a clause in my contract where I couldn't talk about things or that I was leaving. And so 6 months later, when that show is airing, then it's leaked that we're then fired for the next season. It was all, let me tell you how the leaks work. They're planted.
Yeah.
And we were all agreed to do a professional joint press release. So, when your colleagues treat you that way, and then you can't say anything legally, and then there's this leak, and you can't talk about that it's leaked and that you actually left the show, it really puts you in a very... It's really sad after doing 18 seasons of the show and working together like that and building the show initially, as a small group. It's hard when you're treated that way. And so people who have, concerns with me saying, well, why are you talking about it now? And this and that. I am talking about it in interviews, but again, my book is a work of fiction. Everyone has the right to tell their own story. And I can now. That's really what it is.
Definitely. And so you kind of laid it out. I was going to ask, what was the difference between when you first joined America's Next Top Model between the end? And it seems like just the environment changed as a whole. And like you said, people have been bringing up a lot of the insensitive things that have happened on the show that at the time wasn't really talked about. But you said that you were uncomfortable. Did you guys talk about it like behind the scenes at the time that it was happening?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Specifically in cycle 4, the whole race swapping shoot, I was very uncomfortable. My parents grew up in South Africa. They're from South Africa under apartheid. So you've got to understand the kind of the family I grew up in. I'm biracial. It just was very uncomfortable. And my reason I only bring up my own ethnicity is because most people think I'm like Brazilian or Spanish or this or that. And my whole life, it's been a struggle because, I tell people I grew up identifying as Black, and then, you get some Black people saying, well, you're not Black enough, or like, oh, you're not Black. And then Spanish people, you're not Spanish. So it's like you receive all of this kind of just negativity. And I actually really didn't experience it until I moved back to the States when I was 19, going to NYU. I was born in the States, but I grew up in Toronto, and I didn't really experience it in Canada. So when I came here, it became this whole thing. So I did go to my co-executive producer at the time because it was kind of understood. Like I knew certain things at that point I couldn't even go to Tyra with. And they basically said I had to do that shoot. And I said, well, I'm going to look like this is my idea. And they said, don't worry, we'll cover you in the edit. You won't look bad. And, still to this day, I get people who say, you were the creative director. This was your creative. And, everyone online, they all have their opinion, and you just let them have their opinion, but they don't really know what's going on. And it's difficult. And so even beyond those stories in the book, I wanted to share some, and also let people see a very vulnerable side to myself, because people don't know. I mentioned it once when I was co-hosting The View and in Hot Topics, Barbara Walters, we were talking about adoption because her daughter's adopted. And so I said, well, people don't know that I'm adopted. And like the whole world, like I got all this response, like, you're adopted, I had no clue. So my adoption kind of story, which is somewhat of a unique story, is kind of baked into Pablo's character, because Pablo's not really me, but there's a lot of me. It's inspired by me, but really I'm in every character. But my adoption storyline is part of his storyline, which plays part of the whole overall narrative. So that's something that people can learn. They'll get to learn other things about me in reading the book.